Everything has changed. There was a time when the money in your account was backed up by gold. If you had a $10 note, you owned a claim to a piece of gold worth $10. Today, however, your money is backed by nothing. The real question is, does this impact you? Money is money, right? As long as you have some in your pocket and your local store accepts it, what's the problem? The problem is, because money is backed by nothing, built on a system of debt, it has been designed to lose value each and every year. You might have heard that the central bank is aiming for a 2% inflation rate. What does that mean? That means if they do their jobs correctly, your money is being eroded by 2% with each passing year. And if they don't do their jobs correctly, well, things can get ugly.
Inflation up
8.3% last month.
The consumer price index rose 8.3% in August.
Nowhere was the disappointment expressed more profoundly than on Wall Street, experiencing its worst day in over 2 years.
What do you know about money? You've probably grown up using banknotes, or more recently, sending transactions online. If I wanted to send you money right now, for example, I could whip out my phone, type in your bank details, hit send, and the bank would simply move a few digits around to represent the value being transferred from my bank account to yours. No physical money would even need to trade hands. But it wasn't always this way. Long before we printed faces on paper to represent money, we transferred value using the barter system. After that, we used shells. But most enduringly, we used gold. Makes sense, right? Gold is easily portable, it has a limited supply, it's hard to destroy, and most importantly, gold is valuable. Very valuable. But there was a problem with using gold to pay for goods. You see, if you wanted to buy something expensive, you could carry a small piece of gold with you, no problem. But what happens when you want to buy something cheap? Let's say we're still using gold today and you wanted to buy a loaf of bread. When the cashier says that will cost 1/50th of a gram of gold, sir. Well, I think you can see the problem. With all of gold's strengths, it's not easily divisible. So what if we had something that represented gold? What if when you go to buy that loaf of bread, you could hand the cashier an IOU? Effectively, you'd still be trading gold for bread, but now you don't have to worry about getting out your pickaxe every time you fancy some toast. Introducing paper money. This is what was known as the gold standard. We used dollars to trade for goods and services, but these dollars were still backed up by gold. However, first in 1933 and then subsequently in 1971, the US decided to cut the link between paper money and gold. Now, this is where you're probably expecting me to tell you this was a terrible mistake. After all, you've heard online that money is worthless unless it's backed up by something, right? While there is absolutely merit to this argument, after all, in the current system, we have to rely on central bankers to make sensible decisions. In reality, though, there are negatives to a gold-backed system as well. You see, gold restricts the money supply from growing, and that can limit the growth of a flourishing economy. But with all of that said, what you really care about is this. How does this impact you? The short answer: inflation. You see, when money is backed by gold, it limits the inflation rate. Generally, inflation was around 0.5%. Yes, your money would still be worth slightly less with each passing year, but with inflation being so low, you might not even notice. In today's system, however, inflation can fluctuate wildly. In the US, inflation has been as high as 13.3% in 1979, as low as 0.1% in 2015, and in recent years once again rose, this time to 9.1% in 2022. Now you see the problem. Because inflation is managed by humans, who are by our very nature fallible, you simply don't know what inflation will be tomorrow, next week, or even next year. And this is where things can get bad. Because unless you do something to protect your money, one day you may wake up to find that the money you've been saving from your years and years of hard work, suddenly isn't worth what it once was. So, what can you do? If inflation is eroding your wealth, how do you fight back? How do you protect and even grow your money? Well, this is where the world of investing comes in. Now, you've probably heard the phrase, if you don't get your money working for you, you'll forever be working for money. And the concept is simple. You put your money into something and it grows over time. But why exactly does it grow? And surely it can't be that simple, right? The truth is, no, it's not that simple. From the complex jargon thrown out by Wall Street to the threat of a recession or the potential to lose your money, you need to understand what you're doing. That's why it's time to cut out the BS. It's time you understand exactly how to invest, how you can grow your wealth. In today's world, the internet is littered with investment opportunities. But I want to talk about the stock market. Why the stock market and not these other types of investments? Well, we will touch on these other types later on, but the reason the stock market is so favored by the wealthy is because it offers several advantages. For one, it's easy to get started. You just need to download an online broker app. In the US, for example, you have options such as Robinhood and Webull. In the UK, you have Trading 212, Free Trade, and many more. And you can buy your first share in a matter of minutes. Second, the stock market usually has high liquidity. That's a fancy way of saying when you go to buy or sell your shares, there will nearly always be someone out there willing to make that trade with you. Take real estate, for example. It might take a long time to find a buyer if you want to sell your property. With the stock market, though, it is nearly instant. Third, the stock market allows you to buy a piece of the world's growing economies. As companies across the world make money, you make money. But still, for many, the stock market can seem daunting. Where do you begin? How do you know which companies to buy? If you pick the wrong companies, aren't you going to lose money? And what happens if the stock market crashes? Now, these are all valid questions and ones which often deter new investors. But I have good news for you. You don't need to know which companies are going to do well and which aren't. Quite frankly, nobody knows which companies are going to do good or bad. As Matthew McConaughey himself once said,
All right.
Oh, Christ.
How you doing?
No, not that clip, this one.
Number one rule of Wall Street. Nobody, I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or if you're Jimmy Buffett, nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in circles. Least of all stockbrokers. Right? It's all a fugazi. You know what a fugazi is?
Oh, Fugazi, it's fake.
Yeah, fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's never landed. It is no matter. It's not on the elemental chart. It's not real.
Right.
Right.
You see, when you enter the stock market, if you start trying to pick individual stocks, you're basically lacing up your boots to go into battle with hedge fund managers, pension fund managers, and other professionals who have hundreds of employees and years of experience. Now, you might do okay for a while, but it's like trying to enter Wimbledon and compete against the world's best. Outside of the occasional point, you're going to be clinging on for dear life. So what if I told you there is an alternative? An alternative which means you can invest in stocks, but you don't have to pick the individual winners. You don't have to win at the game by being smarter than everyone else. You can simply bet on the house to win on average. Now, I am, of course, talking about index funds. Index funds allow you to own a small piece of the largest companies within a country. So, for example, when you buy a share in the S&P 500, you're buying a chunk of America's 500 largest companies. In the UK, if you buy the FTSE 250, you're buying a small piece of the UK's largest 250 companies. And these indexes are generally weighted, so you're buying more of the bigger companies and less of the smaller ones. You see, you're not picking individual stocks anymore. You're not betting on Tesla alone to perform well, or Apple or Amazon. Instead, you're betting on an entire country. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely, I'm never gonna get rich betting on an entire country, right? Well, later on, we're going to talk about other markets and how you can leverage them to increase your returns. But for now, stick with me here and pay close attention because this is important. Over the last 30 years, the US stock market has returned an average of 10% per year. The average US investor, however, only 5%. So how can it possibly be that the average investor doesn't even get the stock market average? Well, to be blunt, the average investor is terrible at investing. The average investor is driven by emotions. I'm sure you probably heard the phrase, right? You should buy low and sell high. But be honest with me, when you see the price of an investment rising, are you tempted to put even more money in? And when you see the price falling, are you tempted to take your money out, or at the very least, not invest as much as you had originally planned? This is quite literally the opposite of buying low and selling high. And we are all affected by our emotions. So, what can you do? Well, you have two paths to choose. The first is where you actively look for stocks. You invest both your time and your money, and on average, you'll get only 5%. The second path is where you put your ego to one side. You acknowledge that maybe you aren't quite good enough to play with the world's elite, and instead you invest in index funds, and you walk away with a 10% return. In fact, Warren Buffett famously made a bet with hedge fund manager Ted Seides on this exact point. So, what was that bet? Well, Buffett staked $1 million that he would make more money over a 10-year period by simply purchasing and holding the S&P 500, compared with a hedge fund manager who spent those same 10 years actively researching and picking stocks. Now, despite the hedge fund manager's years of experience and his hard work across those 10 years, Buffett, even though he did less work, walked away the winner. On this point, you can argue with the data until you're blue in the face, but the facts are the facts. Again, I know you want to make more than 10% per year, but picking stocks or trying to time the market is not the way to achieve that. We will come to that shortly. Now, you might still be thinking, but Tom, I'm fearful of losing my hard-earned money. What happens when the stock market crashes? Now, notice I said when the stock market crashes, not if, because the stock market, it is gonna crash. In fact, on average, the stock market drops by double digits once every other year. That's 36 times since 1950. So why should you not be fearful of this then? Well, the truth is the only people who have to worry about crashes are short-term investors. If you are a long-term investor, you can ride the good times and the bad times. Just like a roller coaster, you know there are going to be ups and downs. But in the stock market, as long as you hold for long enough, the good times will generally far outweigh the bad. But there is something that you need to know. While the average return is 10%, most years are nothing like this. Sure, if you add them all up, they come to a 10% average. But some years, you'll be carried on a tidal wave and make 30% profit. Other years, the stock market will crash and you'll lose the same. The question is, do you have the bottle to not get overly excited during the good years And more importantly, can you hold your nerve and follow the plan in the bad years too? Okay, so that's great, but what if you're not happy with a 10% return? What if you want more? And trust me, I get it. It wasn't that long ago, I was 22 and I was desperately searching for investment opportunities that would make me more money more quickly. I remember seeing £500 in my bank account and thinking to myself, if I can just get a 10% return on my investment, that will earn me a whopping £50? £50 for the whole year? Are you kidding me? So I went searching for answers. I listened to countless hours on YouTube, read books, read blog posts. I watched adverts of traders claiming that they could double their money in a week with just 2 hours of work per day. Set your trades in the morning and then relax for the rest of the day, they said. It all sounded too good to be true. It was. After more research, I found that 76% of traders actually lose money. Now sure, some traders are the exception to the rule, but they're just that, the exception, not the rule. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm not gonna trade, but what if I pick out individual stocks? What if I find undervalued companies and buy them for the long term, just like Warren Buffett does? Now that can work, but there's a problem here too. You see, when Warren Buffett started investing, the stock market was highly inefficient. That means if he found information before someone else, he could gain an advantage. Through this advantage, he could beat the stock market average and double his money quicker than everyone else. So, what's the problem with this, I hear you ask? Well, the stock market has evolved. When he began, stocks were traded with physical pieces of paper. The competition was low, and it was possible to find these bargains. Today, however, with the advent of Bloomberg terminals, the rise of the internet, and the rapid proliferation of data, it has become extremely difficult to find your own competitive advantage. Again, it's not impossible, but the people who can manage it, we're generally talking about the exceptions to the rule. But having said all of the ways to avoid, there is a way to grow your money more quickly. Still with me? Let's take a look. You've probably heard people online saying you can make quick money with virtually no risk. Right, well, surprise, surprise, they're lying. If you want a higher return, you must take on higher risk. I'll say it again. If you want a higher return, you must take on higher risk. I wish there was some magical formula I could simply tell you to avoid this reality, but one does not exist. So, if you choose to take more risk, how exactly do you do it? And this is really important. Not all risk is created equal. Now, you already know that picking individual stocks is like going to battle against trained professionals, so this is not ideal. Trading, while it sounds great in theory, often proves to be a disaster. So, what exactly should you do? Step 1, you need to build a portfolio. A portfolio is just a fancy way of saying that you have more than one investment. So let's say, for example, that you start with the S&P 500. Now you could put all of your money into this, but then as we've covered, you'll only get a 10% average return per year. So instead, let's say you put 60% of your money into the S&P 500. That leaves another 40%, which you can invest into other things. Now you have 40% to play around with, 40% where you can take higher risks. Still though, there is a smart way of doing this and a not so smart way. Specifically, what we're looking for is something called low correlation investments. Don't worry, it's more simple than it sounds, and we're going to break it down together. So let's compare two portfolios, one with high correlation investments and one with low correlation. Both portfolios contain 50% Apple. Now in the first portfolio, we're going to add a second investment, Samsung. It goes without saying, but Apple and Samsung, they're pretty similar, right? Sure, they have some differences, but they operate in similar industries, they sell similar products, and importantly, they are both impacted by the same changes in the economy. Imagine, for example, there's a chip shortage globally. Both companies are going to suffer. If instead of that, people simply decide to cut down on buying the latest phones, both companies are going to take a hit. These are known as high correlation investments. And what that means is they will often rise and fall together. Now, is it possible that one of these companies can perform well and the other one struggles? Well, yeah, of course. They are separate companies, but you get the point that they are both clearly affected by similar forces in the economy, and hence they have high correlations. Now, let's go back to the second portfolio. Again, you still put 50% of your money into Apple. This time, however, you put the other 50% into the company known as Johnson & Johnson. They are known for their products such as Listerine, Tylenol, and Johnson's baby shampoo. Totally unrelated to selling technology products. Let's say there's a chip shortage now. All people decide to stop buying the latest phones. Sure, Apple will still be affected, but Johnson & Johnson are not going to be. Apple and Johnson & Johnson are far less correlated than Apple and Samsung are, and that makes them a better pairing. That means one sudden change in the economy, it's less likely to hammer your entire portfolio. Now, the principle of low correlation investments forms the basis of something called the Sharpe ratio. It's used by the world's top investment managers to make better investment decisions. And while it's outside of the scope of this video to go into too much detail, the key takeaway is this. We want to look for investments which have two things. Number one, high potential returns. And number two, low correlation. Now, you might want to know how this applies to you, right? Again, you might be looking for higher returns, so which types of investments should you include? Now, for this video, I want to give you a framework for you to do your own research. I want you to know which types of investments make sense and which don't. I want you to understand investing principles. It's not my place to tell you what to buy or what to sell. I just want to present you with the data and let you come to your own conclusions. But I also do want to be as helpful as possible, and that means being specific wherever I can. So there are two types of uncorrelated investments that I personally hold outside of my index funds. Now, these are right for me based on my age and my risk tolerance, but that doesn't mean that they're right for you. These are two investments I've been talking about for years, and yes, before anyone asks, I'm still buying them, and no, I haven't sold any of them since my previous videos. So the first is Cathie Wood's ARK. And similar to this is an investment known as Scottish Mortgage Investment Trust in the UK. The second is cryptocurrency. Specifically, I like to buy and hold the major projects. Now, while there are some hidden gems in the rest of the market, the risk sometimes is simply too high. Now, I'm not saying that these are right for everyone. Certainly, they are not. What I'm saying, though, is that these are high potential and they have low correlation with my index funds. As such, according to the Sharpe ratio, an argument can be made for including them as part of a diverse portfolio. But, and do not overlook these two important points. First, I approach both of these investments with a 10-year time horizon. Both are very volatile, and it's easy to lose money unless you're thinking long-term. Second, the risky investments such as these should not make up the bulk of any portfolio. The majority should be index funds. The majority should be betting on a country as a whole. After that, the percentage that you invest into the riskier investments, that's a personal decision. For some, you'll be happier with higher risk, higher return. For others, these investments will be too risky to include at all. There is no right decision. There is only the decision which feels right for you. Now, the purpose of this video is to give you an understanding of the crazy world of investing. I know it can seem scary at times. I felt that myself before I started learning more as well. There will be ups and downs along the way, and I'm not going to pretend that there won't be. For those of you who want more specific steps, such as which apps do I use to get started, how do I find them, how do I find these index funds that you've talked about, and all of these types of questions, I invite you to open up the description below where I have outlined more exact details on the process. Now, if you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, I want to take a minute to explain where I've been, why this video is so different to previous ones, and how I see the channel developing moving forwards. Okay, so first, where have I been? This is going to be a completely left field turn, but I've been using my time recently to follow my childhood dream, attempting to turn professional at golf. I know, completely random, right? I've never even mentioned golf to you before. Now, there's many things in my life, many things that I'm no good at all. But one thing, I've always kind of had this natural talent and absolute love for sports. Not just golf, I've always felt more at home on a tennis court, playing football, cricket, table tennis, basically any sport than I do in any other area of my life. So when I was around 11, I started playing golf. And without lessons, in fact, without even having real golf clubs, we bought these cheap fake knockoffs online, some fake ping golf clubs from eBay. With them, I got to a decent standard at around age 15, and I found myself playing in this county tournament, and I realized all of the people I was up against had been playing for twice as long as me. They had coaching every week, all the new equipment. And while that stuff obviously would have been lovely, it was out of our price range. And there I was just kind of figuring it out as I was going along. Now, I then took a 10-year break from golf, but I've always had this in the back of my mind. What if I didn't stop? What if I had lessons one day? What kind of level could I have got to? And I don't know if you're the same way as me, but one thing I think about in life is it's so important just to try. It doesn't matter if you fail. In fact, trying and failing is so much better than not trying at all, right? So why not give it a go? So while working on YouTube and investing, I saved up every single penny. I basically became a hermit for a few years so I could save everything I have and give it a go. And so I gradually started cutting down on my YouTube and focusing on golf. Now that is unfortunately why the quality of my previous videos towards the end, they started to drop. And it got to a point where I didn't really want to keep producing low quality videos. So I decided to fully commit to golf. So that is where I've been. Probably not what you were expecting, right? I know, completely random. Now to the future of this channel. Firstly, I'm still playing golf and working very hard towards my goal. I have a dream and I'm not giving up on it. But I keep playing too many hours a day and getting injured. So it's quite clear at this point I have to cut back. And that gives me free time. So I started thinking to myself the other day, well, YouTube is something I felt very passionate about for many years. I'm naturally very interested in learning new things anyway, quite obsessively, to tell you the truth. It's kind of a blessing and a curse. I also love sharing things that I've learned with people, and what could be better than YouTube for that? So the plan moving forwards is to keep pursuing golf, but to also use my spare time to focus on producing high quality videos here on YouTube. Now today we've talked about investing, as that's what I've talked about with you in the past. But the truth is, future videos are going to be on a diverse range of different subjects. Basically anything which I think is really interesting and you're going to enjoy learning about. Now, importantly, I'm not going to release a video every week. It'll be more like once a month at most, so I can focus on making each one as high quality as possible. Now, I know for some of you, you may simply want to hear about investing, and that is absolutely fine. But if you have enjoyed this video, all I ask is, first off, subscribe and give the next video a chance too. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. Either way, it's really good to be back. So thank you for your time, and I will see you again very soon.